Hagai Dawa Nanihan. So what are your guys' names?
I'm Esther Stutzman. I am Coos, Hanis Coos, and Komemma Kalapuya.
And I'm Shannin Stuzman, also Hanis Coos in Komemma Cultural.
So can you tell us a bit about yourself and your ties to this area?
On my mother's side, which is Komemma Kalapuya, our people have always been here. We're the Komemma, which is the southernmost Kalapuya group. There are 3 distinct groups, but we're the southernmost. And so we always say we've been here since the world began.
Basically the same thing that she said. I was actually raised in Coos Bay, which is, so I had more of a raising of my Coos background, very coastal, things like that. Then when we moved back over to the valleys, we learned a lot more about the Kalapuya. But was raised my whole life traditional, and going to powwows and drumming and dancing and salmon festivals and all that kind of good stuff. So,
How did you become involved with the development of the Kalapuya Dictionaries?
Oh, it's been a long journey. Born and raised in Coos Bay, and went to school there and got married, and my husband was in the Air Force, and so we moved around. We wound up in Everett, Washington, and then when my 3 girls grew up and moved out, we kind of looked at each other, my husband and I, and we said, what are we doing here? Our home is in Oregon. And so we moved to Yoncalla, which is the land of my mother's people, the Komemma Kalapuya. And being a person who's always worked with schools and specifically with Indian education programs since 1974, I thought, well, it would be really nice to start introducing some really specific Kalapuya history and language into the schools. I could not find one source of the Kalapuya language. It had been heavily advertised for years that the Kalapuya people were extinct. And that began the journey of trying to find everything I can about the Kalapuya people and specifically about the language, which was non-existent. We have no fluent speakers.
and then what was about 7 years ago?
I think so.
This man named Paul McCartney, not the singer, got a hold of Mom and said, I've been studying your language for several years now, and I think it's the most beautiful language I've ever heard in my life. Would you like to learn it? And we were like, yeah, hello, so we met up with him, and ever since then we worked together to collaborate, and he wanted to make a dictionary with all the words, and the man was very, very precise in, so there's 3 dialects. There's the Tualatin, the Santiam, and the Komemma, and he was giving each word he would give for each dialect, and then he'd give examples of each one. And sometimes he'd even include the Shinnequawa. So if you do look at the dictionaries, you'll see like one word is like, huge because he just is so detailed about it. So we worked for, I don't know, about 3 or 4 years with him, and we finally got to Z and done with it. And then we were able to talk about, getting it printed and published and all that. So,
In the printing of that big of a dictionary, it's 3,500 pages. He got some estimates on it, and it was so expensive that he was going to mortgage his house.
and he wanted to donate all these. He didn't want any money. He wanted to donate them all to the universities, the colleges, and things like that. So,
But he got very ill and entered the hospital, and within days he passed away.
and we were like, what the heck do we do now,
We took over the project and decided that it was his last wish for it to be published. He even picked out a publishing company to do that. And when we saw how much it was going to be, we about fell through the floor. $18,000 to print 150 copies.
So we ended up just choosing to do 100. So my youngest daughter, Ayana, she's like, oh, well, why don't we just make a GoFundMe? We're kind of new to the whole internet thing, so she put up a GoFundMe, and under 2 weeks, she raised $10,000 for the printing of the dictionary project, and we were able to get that first 100 printed off. So there's 4 volumes. There's 2 English to Kalapuya and 2 Kalapuya to English.
Do you have any tribal backing when you were doing this endeavor, or was this purely something that you had to go in your own pockets or crowdfund for?
No, it was purely we as a family and individuals and the Kalapuya people. We have a lot of interest and support from people who are not native, and also people from other tribal groups that have supported us and backed us and helped to raise money.
Were there any outreach to the local Indigenous tribes in Oregon about this, or was that not something you guys wanted to explore or something you attempted to do?
Well, I don't think that anyone really knew about it, you know what I mean? So we were just putting this thing together and wanting, not that we were wanting to keep it to ourselves, it's just kind of how it happened. It was just us with Paul working it out and publishing it, so we didn't reach out to any tribal people or any other, you know what I'm saying? Paul was our main person. He had so much knowledge in it, so we just said, yeah, sure, through everything, and he led us through it, you know?
One of the things we wanted to make sure of was that the efforts of his work and our work weren't taken advantage of. And that's why we kind of kept it close to our group. There's a lot of problems with
Copywriting, people taking things and saying it's theirs, or look what I did type of thing. So that's why she's very traditional in that, like storytelling and songs. She does not like them recorded or written down, because people do that. They'll take it and change it around and say, oh, well, this is my story about this and that. And Native people we didn't write anything down. Everything we learned was oral or taught by watching. So we never did have things written down. It's, people they'll copy it and just make it their own and try to get the credit for everything. I mean,
a lot of cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
So we were trying to steer clear of that, not wanting to just keep it to ourselves, but so that we would have control over how it was done and how it's dispersed.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your project and how far you guys are on. Do you have a curriculum? Is it more oral based right now? Just love to hear anything about it.
We are currently in the infancy of learning about the language. Our problem is that we do not have fluent speakers. And those ethnographers and linguists who collected the language early on were from different countries. They heard the language differently. And from what I hear, there were often a lot of arguments between these people about how things were pronounced and how the sentences go together. And so we have to sift through all of that. But as our friend Paul said, it's your language. Standardize what you want. And that's what we've been doing. And quite frankly, we're somewhere between kindergarten and 3rd grade on learning the language. We know enough about the structure of sentences. When Paul passed, we were just learning about how to do the tenses, future, past tense, and that sort of thing. He was brilliant with teaching all of that sort of things. So we do not have a curriculum yet.
we put together a small curriculum for, we did
6th grade.
6th graders for 9 weeks at the school I work in Yoncalla, and we did write some of it down, just like numbers, colors, animals, I hear, I see. just so the kids can, we may not have spelled it correctly or whatever, but it was nice for them to have something to hold on to and to go over. But we did that for 9 weeks, 6th graders, and they loved it. They just loved the fact they could see me at the store and say, "Kapai," you know, say hello. And
we stressed to them that they were the only 6th graders in the entire world who could speak parts of the Kalapuya language, and they
thought that was
so
very
proud
cool.
of that.
Yes. And then, of course, for our summer camp that we've had for 47 years, Mom put together this, you know, because each adult that works at the camp usually has like their specialty, so language, drumming, something like that. So she wanted my youngest daughter to do the language, and she says, "Okay, here's what I have for the language." And so she wrote down all the history and all these things, and my daughter looks at it and she just tossed it to the side. She said, "No, nobody cares, Mom." She's like, "Nana, these kids are on summer break. They don't care about that. They just want to know how to say it. They don't care how it's spelled, where the little accents are. The history, they just want to learn. So just let me take over." And she did. She kind of tossed it to the side. And that summer, she taught them all Kalapuya, but it was more like she was up there dancing around and orally doing it. She wasn't handing out pieces of paper and things like that. Kind of maybe crushed her feelings a little bit, but she got it done, you know? Yeah. Before she even graduated from high school, she was speaking Spanish fluent, so she's really good at languages as it is, so.
But one of the nice things is that we have had a couple of classes with people. We had about a dozen people in our first class. And all we did was just play the basics. It wasn't anything like making paragraphs or sentences, but teaching them things like how to say hello, how to say your name, yeah, that sort of thing, colors, numbers, so that they could at least pick up parts of it.
Oh, and the pronunciation guide, we don't really have an alphabet. We do have the pronunciation guide, which kind of helps you to.
And then COVID, which stopped our classes in their tracks.
And camp and everything else.
And it stopped our progress, literally. One of the things I want to put together is a curriculum guide to the language. But also one of the things that is kind of holding us back is a little bit of our own hesitation and self-doubt as to how we're doing it right. But right now, we're working with 2 people. We know that one is a linguist. The other one is I guess you might say, an amateur linguist in a way. And they are very, very, very willing to help us put the structure into the language initially so that we can speak it with confidence.
Yes, and their specialist, the man that came down, he's like, "Now, I heard it, and I heard there's this glottal stop. It's not really a glottal stop, it's a," what did he call it?
I can't remember.
A glottal pause. And I mean, he's that good, and he's like, "When I hear that, I know that it's this and that." And we're just like, okay, well. So we do have people that are professionals that wanting to help us and spend their time.
So while we frame that, and of course summer is really a busy time for everyone. So when fall officially gets here, we will be getting together with these couple of people and the interested members of our community. And we will be doing classes, but we have one other really exciting project. We are going to put together kids' books, not storybooks, but you know those kind of cardboard books?
The thicker pages.
Like for first grade kindergarten. And we're going to do like one for trees, one for fish, one for birds, colors.
Numbers.
We already got a quote on it, so we know how much money we're going to have to raise. And we are having the kids in the schools illustrate the books instead of having some professional artist.
So far we've got 3 different school districts that we've worked with that have drawn. We say something that's red or something in 5 of or an animal or something like that. So we've got some pretty cute drawings that we're gonna, a bunch of us will vote on to see which one we want and we'll credit that child. But there are some of those kids, every time I say, "Did you judge it?" Or you guys, you know, they're very excited about it, so.
Yeah, and then her youngest daughter who did the fundraiser is going to use that as one of her projects at Southern Oregon University, and she'll get credit for it. She's going to put the whole thing together,
It's easy
hand it to us, and we hand it to the printer. Yeah.
So that'll be exciting.
That sounds so awesome. What was it like when you approached these schools to ask for the children to make the illustrations for your books?
Well, we do all kinds of presentations. Usually we'll get called by a certain school and say, can you come talk about Kalapuyas or tell stories? And we usually say, well, if we could spend a couple days there, then we could have the kids do an art project, and teachers love art projects. So we usually manage to get that in there.
We did, for the Coos School District, we did the after-school program. So Wednesdays they had half day, and the kids that couldn't go home at that time or whatever, they'd come into this classroom. We had, oh my gosh, a lot of kids. But we were there for 8 weeks? 8 weeks, every Wednesday, and so we had one classroom to where, you know, they come and have a snack, and then we did everything from storytelling to drumming to language, and then on their free time or when if they were done early, then they would then do that. Then we did, what was that other school we did? Territorial grade school. We did their classrooms for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or 4 sessions, I should say. And so the same thing. So our last session was specifically drawing pictures for the book.
And she works in the Yoncalla School District with the Native kids in an entire classroom, so she'll be collecting more pictures.
Another question I was wondering, are these school districts the demographic mixed, or do you go to the classroom specifically for Indian Ed, or how does that work?
They're pretty much mixed. Not many school districts in Douglas County, where we live, have Indian education
I think
programs.
it's just us in Roseburg, right?
Yes.
That's the only two in Douglas County. So a lot of these kids, you know, they're in the Indian education program. They know nothing about their traditions or their roots. They just, well, I know that I'm this tribe, but they weren't ever raised traditionally. So that's part of our job. My job is to not only make sure they make it through school successfully, but learn at least some respect and some culture, real general, you know what I mean? And if they really want to get into it, we kind of help them narrow it down to whatever tribe they are, if they want to get regalia or, you know, or something like that. So it's very rare that we actually find a Native student that has cultural background and know their traditions, so it's always a mix.
She hosts cultural classes. We're going to be setting them up probably once a week. Drumming and dancing, and do some arts, storytelling, a little bit of everything. We worked in so many schools for 40 years that sometimes when we'll meet one of the kids, like in a grocery store, you get these strange reactions, like maybe they think that teachers don't shop for food, but something like, I know you, you're that Indian lady. Or they'll make some remark, like one little boy said to me after I told them about my great-great-grandfather being a head man of the village. He says, I know you, your grandpa was the king of the Indians.
Yes. Yeah, we're like, and this other kid said, I remember when my grandpa and you used to hunt werewolves together. Yeah. But yeah, when you see them out in public, they look at you like, and we're pretty good at saying, did I come to your school? But yeah, that's real general, so it's easy for us to say that, but with adults, it's not so easy.
Or we teach some short little songs in not only Kalapuya, but in other languages, because we do music education also. And they'll come up to us and say, I remember that song, and they'll start singing it. So they're really proud of, I think, of being able to have that knowledge of a different culture, which makes us feel really good.
So the curriculum we did for the 6th grade class, this right here is like an example of that Mom put together, our counting.
Can you hold it up?
In Kalapuya, hold it up, cover your face.
Awesome.
So it's Tauna, Gami, Bashin, Tapa, Wan. Kind of weird how 5 is 1 or 1, so. That's just her way. I think it's a good way to put it out there, you know what I mean, for kids to have a visual. And something they can touch, you know what I mean, other than just the oral part of it. But
And they learn it pretty well. We even do math with it. You know, we'll say, what is gammy plus top? And they'll give us the answer in Kalapuya. So that we can do a lot of fun activities with this.
Yeah, it looks like a really good learning tool.
Yeah, I think so.
well, she's a former teacher, so you know she's pretty good at doing that.
I was wondering, from your perspective, what is it like to learn Kalapuya as adults versus what you're seeing in kids learning Kalapuya?
Kids are sponges; their little brains are still growing, so they just absorb all that, and they're very good at it. And I'm not. I'm not very good at this. I'm sure if someone was a fluent speaker and I could speak with them back and forth, it would be perfect for me. But it's really hard for me to learn this way. You know what I mean? Mom's really good at it because she's a teacher, an English major, and she likes to have it all organized on paper. But I'm not the best at it. The kids just suck it up. I mean, they all do really well. They remember stuff more than I do. But it's hard for me as an adult, and Mom's speaking like 3 different languages. I'm sure it's a little bit crazy.
It is. It's crazy for me with my 81-year-old brain to absorb all of this. I learned Spanish when I was young. I was going to be a Spanish teacher. That was one of my goals. I got married and moved to Germany into a village where no one spoke English. So I got it by immersion very quickly. So I speak German also. And when we came back to the States in the early 70s, I started learning Chinookwawa because they were just then starting to hold classes in different places. And now Kalapuya. And my brain is not knowing what to do. So I'm having a very difficult time.
She wants to structure it like English, like, say example, you say, Shannon went down to the river. Well, our language isn't like that. It's just Shannon eats saw, Shannon go river. That's it, you know? It's hard for me because the verb never changes, like sit, sat, sitting, just one word. There's several examples, like the word berry is kayana, but because it starts with a K, you put an A-N in front of it, so it's on kayana. So I'm confused as to why don't we just spell it on kayana, you know what I mean? That's some of the things I don't understand about that part, and then that's just present tense. There's no male or female separation there. It's basically just one thing. I don't even know about the past or the future tense.
It's a whole new set of rules, complete new set of rules.
And then it's the type of language where you could take like 3 words if you want and put it into one big word, to where it's like, instead of saying the black dog, it's all the bucket, all, you know, pushed into one word. So I'm still struggling a lot with it, but I just kind of I'd rather listen to it and repeat it back and forth and try to read it, definitely.
One of the sources we have is a publication called the Kalapuya Texts that was put together in the early part of the 1900s by some ethnographers and linguists. And it was written down as they heard it. There were no recordings of it. So we started to rely on that. And then when we heard some of the recordings, because we have one recording of the Kalapuya language, it completely conflicted.
So for example, like I said, the number 2 is gammy. So it's kind of a G and a K together. So one person heard a K, one person heard a G. So it's gammy, like that. It's kind of hard. So the recording we have is of a shirt tail relative, John Hudson, in 1953 on the Grand Ronde Reservation, and the man says, hello, and then our relative will say, ka-pai, ka-pai. He has to say it twice. And then the man says, goodbye. And then, so the man is very like this, and if he doesn't answer in enough time, the guy just kind of was like, we'll go move on to the next one. And he was very particular about it. And then we had the recording of the songs. And at the very end of the recordings, we have, it's all from body parts to language to he walked, he ran, and then at the very end he asks him, can you understand the different dialects of the Kalapuya, which are the Tualatin and the Santiam, being Kalapuya or Komemma? And he says, yes, we can understand the two northern ones, but they have a really hard time understanding the Komemma. We're the southernmost. And in my head, I always think of like people from like Louisiana, that real thick accent, and they kind of have their own lingo. So I kind of think of it that way, that the Komemma people kind of have their own little way of putting words together, that, you know, we're such a small group, a little bit further away from the rest of the groups to, they really couldn't understand us as well. But
And that's
I thought it was really interesting to hear that.
one of the struggles we've been having is that Paul McCartney gave examples in all three dialects in the dictionary. And the least amount of examples is with the Komemma, the Yoncalla language. I would like to resurrect our language using Komemma dialect, but there's not enough information there. So we normally borrow from the Santiam because that's our closest neighbors. But as Paul said, it's your language, standardize it as you will. So that's going to be something to work on.
I also think, you know, there's importance to language revitalization, but language is continuing to evolve. So like you said, you know, it's your language and you create the standards and the rules for it. And it's so interesting to hear your guys' whole process.
And I'm sure this is going to be a process that's going to go on for several generations.
Do you see a connection between language revitalization and other issues tribal communities are working on, like land stewardship, historic preservation, and cultural wellness?
Oh, absolutely, it all goes together. One of the things that we're going to be doing is that on our traditional land, we're going to be naming places like creeks and mountains and meadows. Nothing that's going to be like geographically changed on a map, but this will be for our own use. And the methods that we use to preserve the land will have certain names in Kalapuya. Part of the things we want to do on the property that we have, she wants to start a worm farm, and its name is
Cha Platzak Arawatsak.
which means the place of the worms.
The raising of the worms.
Raising of the worms.
And our property is named Cha Tumenma. So basically it translates to the land of or for the people of the Indians. So when people say, well, where are you from or who are you? They would say Cha Tumenma. So the property that we were given back in the Land Back Act is called Cha Tumenma.
And that's an interesting subject.
It's everything, language and
Yeah.
food and plants and everything.
We live on the exact same land where our ancestors have lived since the world began, the Komemma Kalapuya. In fact, our sacred site is
Less than a mile.
less than a mile from where I live, outside of Yoncalla. And several years back, I think about 3 years back, a man came to us and said he wanted to honor the land back movement and give us some property. And I thought, oh, you know, a couple, 3 acres would be really nice. 207 acres of pristine forest,
Old growth,
meadow, old growth,
a creek.
a creek. It's beautiful. And he has gifted that to us.
As a family.
As a family, he wanted to put it into a land trust because he didn't want us to sell it.
Yeah, our promise to him is that we will never sell it and we will never clear cut it. It's been 4 years. These amazing people that we've met through all of our presentations that are helping us because we don't know anything about the health of the forest. So we met some great people and they came and did a whole survey. They walked the whole 207 acres and put together this health plan, and there's 14 different zones on that property. And so he had to write up a plan for it. So what in the goals now, future goals, to keep the land healthy and the future of it healthy. So that was a lot of work. We've had a lot of people volunteer to come out and do some planting. We did the camas planting last year up in the meadows. We had a lot of people, oh, by the way, someone's gonna come by and plant a bunch of elderberry bushes in your front yard. Okay, you know what I mean? So it's really neat that we have these people to do that. And that's also with our native garden that we're gonna be doing. We have people that are garden people that test the soil and make the raised beds and do all that. And in that, I'm working on language to name the native garden, which we still haven't figured that out. Maybe possibly, you know, and everything will be like in Kalapuya, like on deep is camas, and then underneath will say camas. Things like that. What else?
Galup is mud. I love that word.
She loves that word.
It sounds like mud, galup.
Yeah. And I just think that, you know, we eventually want to get back to the traditional burning of the undergrowth, and of course the camas process of it, harvesting and planting and all that kind of stuff, the bakes.
See, we meeting the group we're talking about, we're a very, very small nonprofit. And it started out as a group of people who wanted to hold summer camps for Indian kids because it just wasn't, the culture was not being taught back in the early 70s. So we started a nonprofit, and that way we could apply for funding for camp. And that's how it all started, with just mainly my family and a few friends. And it started growing that a lot of people from different tribes, non-Indians, were joining us. And when we were donated the land, it was almost overwhelming because none of us at that time knew anything about taking care of the land in an indigenous way. I mean, I've grown gardens before and I know about, you know, not polluting and that sort of thing, but we decided we wanted to get back to the traditional indigenous ways. Luckily, we found some wonderful people who are forest managers and traditional burn practitioners.
Tree specialists, botanists, all that.
And we brought them on the board, and we now have a very strong, functioning board of directors. And so many people who have volunteered to help. We had an event last year, a friend of ours brought 600.
Well, she says, we got to know her very well. She's like, so Shannon, I was thinking we could plant some camas on the property, that'd be cool. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So she's like, well, I'll walk around and see where okay. So then she calls and says, so my friend's gonna drop the camas off. There's 600 of them. And I said, wait, what? What happened to you and I going out? And she says, oh, well, there's much more. So this little planting a handful of camas turned into this event that I, in turn, put up the canopy, set up the tables. We ended up doing a registration, having a meal, having 3 different sessions of planting, nature walk, and then us doing a history. And it was kind of nerving for me because it was supposed to be just her and I going, spending a day out doing things, but now it turned into this event. And then this year, we're gonna plant the camas in our native garden. And I said, let me know right now if this is gonna be something just you and I are gonna do, or are we gonna end up inviting everyone again? And
she brought over 1,000 camas bulbs.
And so we went from just planting a small raised bed to
an event.
Yes. So again, we're doing the registration and the food and the catering and all that kind of stuff. So we're learning.
It's snowballing. It's really getting to the point now where these people who have volunteered to help us, we're taking advantage of that, calling them and saying, hey, you know, what do you know about?
And they've also become really good friends of ours too, and
really,
you know,
really
family almost.
Yeah. So we're really very happy. We're going to have our summer camp there next year. Last year it was 108
108,
degrees.
so the school advised from the heat not to do it. And then this last summer, we had everything ready to go, but we only had 2 kids sign up to be campers. I think a lot, and she was a former camper of ours years ago, and I think that people nowadays have a hard time letting their kids spend the night somewhere, but to come out to the woods for a week, they weren't having it. And it's also, you know, for them to fill out a piece of paper and put it in the mail and mail it off. I mean, because they don't even have to be responsible for anything. They just have to know their name. They walk up and say their name. It's checked off a list. So when we had our powwow, I gave them all a ticket and I said, here, bring this to the powwow and you'll get a free piece of fry bread. That's your responsibility. We're not going to check your name off the list. And we had
50.
She said, how many of these things did you give out, Shannon? I said, I gave one to every student in the school, you know, and the ones that showed up and, you know, and I wasn't gonna, I don't have a list of kids. I don't know if you go to the school or not. We're not just check. So I think kids nowadays really need to learn responsibility and not just, you know, everything's written down for them. So that's another part of the camp was the parents had to be responsible too and fill it out and send it in, but it's two, you know, so.
We're going to be involved in some outdoor schools and day camps on the property this next year.
Yeah. And it's raw property. There's no water, there's no electricity, there's no structures. So what we'd like to see is any of the trees or vegetation, whatever that needs to be, you know, thinned out because of, for health of the forest, use that to build the kitchen, use that to build the bathrooms, you know, and things like that. So we're trying to keep it all in one area.
That to build a longhouse.
Well, that's across the street at the Native Park.
Yeah.
So we have plans, dreams.
Yeah, we do have a lot of dreams.
Sounds amazing. How long again have you guys been doing the camp?
47 years. I was 2 years old, so 1974.
And
And
then,
I mean, the last couple of years we haven't had it. COVID hit, and then the camp that we were using, the property was sold. And then right when we thought we were just not sure what to do is when we got the land given to us, so. But 47 years, I can remember being too young to be a camper, because you have to be in 4th grade, being a camper, then being a youth counselor, and then an adult counselor, and now I'm the director of the whole camp. She stepped down, she's just the resident elder. The scary person you don't want to go talk to when you're in trouble, you know?
Yeah, we had anywhere between 50 and 80 kids every year who went to camp for free because we did fundraising, massive fundraising. We had at the time a very thriving fry bread Indian taco business, and we went to powwows and events.
And the kids are the ones that did a lot of the work, so
Yeah.
they raised their own money. But this camp is very structured, it's very strict. No electronics, no candy, no gum, no coffee. You just come with your clothes and your, you know, whatever. And in the morning we'd sing the opening song, we'd have breakfast, and after every meal the kids had a job to do, like clean the kitchen or put the dishes away or something, and then we had several scheduled activities timed, that's her. And then we'd have lunch structured, and then we'd have, you know, whatever in the afternoon. And I think kids really like structure, they really like knowing what's gonna be next, because a lot of kids are just hit with, let's go, or no, you can't do that. So we train our counselors for 3 or 4 days on what they're gonna be getting into. Some of them, no matter how we train them, just are still blown away by it. But I think the structure is something that every kid needs, but there's some of those kids that come in there from, like she said, it's free. Some of the parents just like, oh cool, I'm just gonna dump my kid for a week, you know. They come from homes that are, abusive, you know, alcoholic, and
Yeah, less than adequate.
these kids, it's the most love, the most attention, the most respect they've gotten in their entire life, you know, and they don't want to go home. They don't want to go home, and it breaks my heart because you can see it in them when they're there. Even though they're acting out or, you know, doing something stupid, you can see that, you know.
Yeah. But we're going to do it again. We will. And we're going to start doing some fundraising. We have one organization who's willing to match whatever we raise
By March.
by March fundraising. So that's going to be our goal. And I write grants, so
She writes grants in her sleep.
that you've been able to provide summer camps and places to be and have such constructive learning, whether that's cultural
Oh,
or
yeah.
just ways of being in general. So
There's a lot of those kids that have adopted us. We haven't adopted it, and they're grown adults now. Some people are in their 30s and their 40s, and they're still like, okay, what time are we going to powwow? Or what time do I need to be there to help you guys set up? Or what should I bring? Which, you know, which shows us that we've taught them well. You know what I mean?
it's been a long run, but we love it.
Would you like to talk about any other language and cultural heritage work that has been meaningful to you, or any work you hope to see happen in this area?
When we had our camp on the Rogue River, 19 beautiful acres that were donated to us for our use every summer, we taught parts of the Tutudene language, which is the language of the people who live right there. My oldest daughter's married to a man who is part Tutudene, and they did some language revitalization quite a few years ago. And so we thought, well, we have 50 or 60 kids here on the river for a whole week. Why not teach them the language of the people who once inhabited there? So we did some work in Tutudene, and every year at camp, we like to teach the kids some words from different cultures. Lakota, Cherokee, Chinakwawa. Not that we're experts in it, but we know people who can speak it and can help us. So using the words at camp, I think, is really, really important.
And then we associate those words. We try to, with like, when we do our nature walks, we'll say, well, this is Camas, but it's also called Undeep, and and so they get to know things in the native language too, and their uses, so.
Yeah.
So what's it feel like for you guys to be able to learn and speak Kalapuya?
Difficult. As I said before, my 81-year-old brain doesn't work as fast as it used to. To me, it is extremely difficult. In fact, learning the language, I think, is one of the most difficult things I've ever attempted. Just because of so many past experiences with teaching and knowing languages and learning, that I have to set aside some of the rules and habits that I had to learn this language. But to me, it means a lot, because we live on our ancestors' land. I think they hear us when we speak.
I'm not very good at picking it up, but I think, I try to throw in those words in my everyday life. I'll say something like "itsa" or something like that, and we've got several people that are doing the language with us that are just absolute genius. My youngest daughter, and then my really good friend, which I call my brother Matt, he gets the language, and he'll call me and just go, "What did I just say?" And I'm like, he picks it up so well. He knows all the rules to it, and I think it's really neat because he's very helpful, and so is my youngest daughter. But I struggle also with it, but it's something that feels really good because I can just kind of say anything I want in Kalapuya. I could even cuss at somebody, I guess, if I wanted to, and they would know what I was saying. So, it would be really cool if I could at least have more than just a "Hi, my name is Shannin. What's your name? How are you feeling?" More in-depth conversation with somebody in Kalapuya would be amazing.
Just wait a few months. We're going to kick it up. We've got some meetings with some linguists after school starts.
You guys can do all that detailed stuff. When you're done, just teach me how to say it, and then I'll be good. It's a lot easier for me that way.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for people that are trying to learn their tribal languages?
Surround yourself with people who know the language, know of the language, who are familiar with the history of the area, the history of the language. It's really important that people who are speaking the language know something about the people who used to speak it. That's why when we teach this in the schools, we don't just go in and say, okay, here's a list of numbers from 1 to 5 in Kalapuya. We tell them the history, who the people are, where they came from, what happened in the 1850s during the treaties. This is the situation now, and this is a language that has been sleeping for all of these years. So laying that basic groundwork of the history and the importance of having the language back. And we always tell them how that makes us feel. when we speak the language, it makes us feel really good.
And if they do have people that are speakers of the language, I mean, you're so lucky to have that, because it's like she said, my sister and her husband, they learned his traditional language, but they had 5 elders there that
It spoke it.
and you couldn't speak English at all. You had to learn as you went. And so my niece and nephew, their little sponge brains picked it up so quickly, and my sister would say, "How do you say this again?" Just feel lucky that you have that, because we don't have really anyone here that can say, "Oh, this is this." And a lot of times, with Native people, they'll say, "Oh, that's called this because," and they'll tell you why it's called that, or the reasoning for it, or maybe it's called that only in the spring because of this, or stuff like that. So it's just feel lucky and just listen.
Yeah.
I always take notes and write them down for future references, but yeah, it's challenging because like every language has its own form. They say there are certain things with their mouth, like I know a lot of my friend from high school, she's Laos, and they don't have the F sound. She says a P instead of an F, say fish, she says pish, because that's just something her people never did. And like our language, they called one of my relatives Paul, but they couldn't say that, so it came out BL, just because my people never had that P sound, so it was more of a BL. So it's almost like hereditary. What floats down is there's some things that are easy for us to say in our language that other people may not be able to say. So it's just kind of strange how things like that happen.
And I have to remember constantly to set aside the rules of grammar in English and German and Spanish. German is easy, but the Spanish, there's a lot of different rules and word orders and things like that. So when I'm really in a mood to study Kalapuya language and learn it, I have to completely forget or put aside what I've already learned.
She's the woman that's got all the sticky notes all around her house, on the stove, on the microwave, on the mirror, in the bathroom, north, east, south, west. She's got like that movie, The Color Purple, when she's learning to read, she has sticky notes all around her entire house in Kalapuya. So, I mean, that's a good way to learn.
It is. The stove is the Okbehanua.
Yes, that's how she knows it, because there's that sticky note.
It is there.
Yep. So that's a way to learn too, but yeah.
Is that what they call a language nest when you label things?
I don't know. It just, to me, seems easy. Every time I go through that doorway, I know that that's a certain direction.
I need to do that, but maybe that'll help me also.
Could be. You never know.
Yeah.
One of the funniest things, I don't know if you want to film this, but Paul McCartney, when we first started having our meetings with him, he gave us a couple pieces of paper, and we looked at it and went, what? And it was a list of every dirty word that he could find.
And Bulgari.
Vulgarism.
Sorry.
Yeah. And he said, now, you won't waste your time looking them up.
Let's learn the language. Yeah.
My youngest daughter, the one who is ex-Navy, has no problem with words at all. She wrote them down on a sticky note.
No filter, in other words.
And she went to get her car serviced. She put the sticky note on her dashboard, got out of the car to have it serviced, and she came back, and the guy who serviced her car looked at her in the oddest, funniest way, because he saw at least 4 really dirty, filthy words that she was trying to remember, sticky noted to her dashboard. But that's how we learn.
And then my youngest daughter was making, I do a lot of crafts, and she wanted to make her a sign for Christmas. And she was sitting there trying to think of, she's like, well, how do you say kiss my butt? And so she made her sign in Kalapuya, but she made it look really pretty and flashy, but nobody knows that this beautiful flashy sign says that saying on it. So it's fun.
Yeah, it is.
We have a good time with it.
We do.
Did you have any mentors or role models growing up who have helped shape you?
I think my elders a couple elder aunties that were really bossy, but
And your grandma for your stories.
now I know what they were doing. I realize that now. It took me a long time. My dad was a real big influence on my life. Some of my uncles, too.
Uncle Joe?
Yeah, my Uncle Joe. He was a fishing boat captain, and he ran a boat out of Depot Bay. And he'd put me on that boat, and we'd go out of sight of land. And he would have with him, he'd have with him a couple of cases of beer, and he'd drink all of that beer while we were way out in the ocean, out of sight of land.
And a tiny boat, you always told me.
In a tiny boat, usually a 12-foot aluminum boat. And he would pass out, and I'd have to bring the boat in. So I learned how to do stuff really early. But yeah, it's my elders, definitely.
Me too. There's very rarely I learn something from my peers, but same thing from her. And like she said, the group that started our summer camp years ago, there was a handful of people that I just call them aunties and uncles. And same thing, I didn't know that sitting there, hanging out with them this whole time, they were teaching me, educating me. I just thought, having a good time, sitting around in the backyard on a drum all day long. They'd have these gatherings in our friend Sweetwater would bring this drum and sit in the backyard. We had those visor the sunglasses that flipped up and down, and he'd sit there and he'd be drumming. And I was by his side the whole time. Just knew that I was learning all the drumming stuff, you know what I mean? Same with the stories, every time she went to something, storytelling, I was right there, you know what I mean? And to this day, I'm still like, oh wait, you've been teaching me this whole time, and I'm 51 years old, you know what I mean? So, elders, basically.
Yes, but I've almost completed passing the baton.
The only thing I learned from kids or something was some technology.
Yeah.
That's about it. But yeah, it's mostly my elders.
Thinking of the up and coming generation in the Native community, what are some of the challenges that you think they will face? And do you have any advice for the younger generations in the community who want to learn their ancestral languages? We kind of answered that part, but the first portion, if you would like to answer.
I would just like to advise the next generation, listen to your elders. Listen to them. That's so important.
Mine would be, well, yeah, listen to your elders, but teach your children respect. Teach your kids that you're the boss, you're not their best friend, because nowadays these kids are so spoiled, and so my kid, they won't do this, or I can't get them to do that. They need to have a voice of authority. They can't be their best friend. They can't be their homegirl or, their little tech buddy. Kids need to realize that, or parents, that there's a reason why we say listen to your elders and respect your elders, because if you don't, they're our future, and they're going to be figuring out where we go as old people, and if, we can't even ask them to get down off a desk, and they're not afraid of the principal, how in the heck, you know what I mean? So I just think that people need to kind of look back in time and look at the whole authority figure and respect and elders, and put down the technology. You can spend all day out in the woods and learn about stuff, and then go home and look up on your phone, what it means or where it come from or what are the uses of it. But to spend some time without your technology, go to a park and climb a tree for you know what I mean, or something like that. We have 207 acres. Come to my house. Go walk across the street and go play in the creek. You know what I mean? Look for stuff. Don't just surround yourself and rely on that phone for everything in the world. That's why I think I'm like the last generation to be like Generation X, to be like, oh, I know about that. I know what that is, because trivia. I never was able to look it up on my phone. I can't ask Google nothing, and I still struggle with it to this day, but they just need to set it down and step outside for a while, or sit down and listen to their elders, because if they continue to rely on technology, we're going to have one of those strange, weird solar flares, and they're not going to have anything. Then we're going to have a bunch of dummies, that don't know anything unless they can push buttons. So I just really think that it's important that they step away from those and learn like we did,